Welcome to my channel. If you've enjoyed watching one or two of our videos and haven't subscribed yet, click that subscribe button now for more captivating stories like this. Don't miss a single story. The tale commences in the domain of the Ardell family, a place abundant with lush greenery and an enchanting aura enhanced by the gentle sunlight. Within this quaint provincial estate, reminiscent of an otherworldly wasteland, a newborn baby came into existence. The attending obstetrician wore a smile of delight, exclaiming with astonishment that the heavens had truly bestowed their blessings upon them. Addressing the expectant mother with utmost respect, she referred to her as "my lady." Meanwhile, the baby's father engaged in conversation with another obstetrician in the background. The attending obstetrician, turning her attention back to the mother, remarked that the baby appeared to be a manly boy. As the mother cast her gaze upon her child, an overwhelming desire to touch him washed over her. To her astonishment, the adorable baby raised both hands as if yearning to touch his mother's hand. The mother remarked that he bore a striking resemblance to the landlord, his father. Curious, the obstetrician inquired about the chosen name. Overwhelmed and fatigued from the birthing process, the mother, perspiring, replied that she had decided to name the baby Lewin Ardell. The adorable infant cried, a customary occurrence for a newborn, while his mother held on to the hope that he would become a beacon of light in this world. Several years had elapsed within the confines of the Ardell family's small provincial abode, where the weather appeared ordinary, akin to any typical day, with sunlight graciously bathing the house and its surroundings. Our protagonist, the young master, stood apart from his peers from an early age. He would eavesdrop on conversations between his father and Mr. Beggins. On this particular day, Mr. Beggins was discussing with the Lord his intention to journey to 8 Lake. The landlord expressed his desire for Mr. Beggins to procure valuable maritime resources during his expedition. Mr. Beggins offered reassurance, pledging to fulfill the task to the best of his abilities. Caught up in his book, Lewin, upon hearing their conversation, turned towards them, calling out to Mr. Beggins. Both individuals directed their attention toward Lewin, with Mr. Beggins addressing him as "young master" and inquiring about the matter at hand. Lewin Ardell gently set the book down on the floor, diverting his attention to Mr. Beggins. He earnestly advised him against venturing near the street adjacent to the South Mountain, cautioning that the mana flow in that vicinity was peculiar. Both the landlord and Mr. Beggins appeared baffled by his statement. Curious, Mr. Beggins inquired about the meaning behind Lewin's words, while the landlord remained rendered speechless. A day later, heavy rain poured down from the skies, accompanied by dark clouds and thunderous electric shocks. Beggins, braving the inclement weather, hurriedly dashed outside the house. Meanwhile, the landlord anxiously awaited his arrival at the entrance. Expressing concern over Mr. Beggins' tardiness, the landlord's worries dissipated as soon as he appeared, chuckling and offering his apologies. Mr. Beggins explained that he had taken a longer route, prompting the landlord to inquire if something untoward had occurred. With a sheepish scratch of his head, Mr. Beggins revealed that, thanks to the young master's warning the previous day, he had avoided the street near the South Mountain. He then learned that the very same location had fallen victim to an attack by a beastman. The beastmen, their eyes ablaze with a crimson hue, emitted menacing growls as they lurked beneath the radiant moonlight. The landlord was struck with shock upon hearing this revelation. Beggins continued to recount how everyone who ventured into that area had fallen victim to danger, except himself, thanks to the young master's warning. The landlord was left speechless, unable to find words to express his astonishment. Intrigued, Beggins posed a question, asking whether the landlord believed that the young master possessed the ability to perceive the mana in the air. Uncertain, the landlord replied that he wasn't entirely sure. Lost in thought and contemplating Lewin Ardell's potential, the landlord looked skyward and expressed his belief that if it were true, then Lewin would undoubtedly be the future of the Ardell family. Meanwhile, within the confines of his room, Ardell engaged in playful manipulation of mana, draping a blanket around himself like a magician's cloak. From that day forward, he continued to exhibit an extraordinary talent for magic. At the tender age of 6, he began sensing the presence of mana, and by the time he reached 7, he was capable of manifesting it. As the years passed, Lewin Ardell reached the age of 10. Graduation day had finally arrived at the esteemed Ignit Magic Academy, renowned as the finest magical institution in the Radiant Kingdom. The Grand Magician, brandishing a radiant mage staff, announced that the student representative and valedictorian would deliver a speech. Lewin Ardell, surpassing numerous children hailing from prestigious families, had secured his place at the academy as the valedictorian, bearing the honorable title of genius. Our protagonist ascended the stage, where the grand magician presented him with an oath to recite. With a raised hand and unwavering confidence in his gaze, Lewin ardently read the oath aloud, concluding his speech. Initially, it was quite overwhelming for him, as he believed that his achievements would elevate his family's status. He thought that everything was falling perfectly into place, with all aspects favoring him. However, reality soon set in. On the first day of class, the professor called upon the valedictorian to demonstrate the skills befitting a genius in valedictorian. In front of him stood a practice dummy, serving as the target for the demonstration. Stepping forward, Lewin conjured a ball of fire in his hand, casting a fireball spell. The professor commanded him to release the magic quickly, but Lewin struggled, beads of sweat forming on his brow, and confessed that he couldn't do it. On the very first day of class, a harsh realization dawned upon Lewin: he was far from being the best, not even close to second best. Struggling to cast the magic spell, he was plagued with self-doubt, questioning what was amiss within himself. To the astonishment of his classmates and the professor, it became apparent that Lewin suffered from a condition known as magic evocation disorder. As he knelt on the ground, it became painfully clear that his body lacked the inherent ability to unleash magic, even within a mere meter's distance. Overwhelmed with despair, Lewin's tears flowed freely as he came to terms with the fact that, as a magician, his own body was woefully inadequate. Walking through the academy's hallways, he quickly realized that it took mere moments for others to discover his humble origins and lack of talent. Consequently, the attitude of those around him swiftly changed. Encountering two students in the hallway, Lewin's path intersected with that of a larger student who carelessly bumped into him, startling him. The student with yellow hair inquired about his well-being but soon began belittling Lewin, referring to his friend's accidental touch as an encounter with a disabled outcast. Mockingly, he wondered aloud what would happen if his friend became disabled too. The student who had collided with Lewin chuckled, using profanity and suggesting that Lewin should wash off the contact. Lewin, his expression growing serious, locked eyes with them. Confusion washed over the two students as Lewin's gaze bore into the larger individual. Within Lewin's thoughts, a contemplation took shape: a person incapable of magic, a blemished man who couldn't even perform magic in the Magic Academy. For those who were envious of him, his current state was the best joy they could have ever had. The larger student demanded an explanation for Lewin's intense stare, his fist clenched and a smile creeping across his face as he uttered the words, "How dare an arrogant bastard who can't even perform magic look at me like that?" After the encounter, Lewin found himself at the back of the academy, venting his frustration by punching the wall. Pausing for a moment, he gripped the wall with both hands, tears streaming down his face as he questioned whether he could ever become a magician. The scene shifted to the canteen, where Lewin stood at the counter, holding his lunch. As he walked amongst the students, all eyes were fixed upon him, some filled with pity, others with disgust. Seating himself, he found that no one wanted to join him for a meal, and he ate alone. Lost in his thoughts, he stared at his food, contemplating the name he once held with pride: Lewin Ardell, the name that had entered the academy with top grades, the name that promised a bright future, the name associated with unwavering diligence. But now, thanks to that accursed curse, the magic genius, who had entered the academy as the most accomplished student, had transformed into a magic cripple. It seemed like everything had come crumbling down. As he walked away, seeking an escape from reality, Lewin believed that this was the end of it all. However, little did he know that a new door was about to open for him. Visions flooded his mind: Lewin engaging in combat, his fists ablaze with fire magic, a mythical dragon by his side as his loyal companion, a fierce battle against a formidable orc, and Lewin unleashing powerful punches infused with his magical prowess. He saw himself facing off against a formidable opponent casting skull magic, only to shatter it with his own ice magic. And amidst it all, a magnificent god with radiant eyes. Lewin couldn't have imagined that there would be a miracle awaiting him at the end of his despair. Suddenly, a system message appeared, proclaiming the activation of an artifact called the Player. A system message materialized, informing Lewin that the status window had been unlocked and the artifact Player had been activated. Lewin found himself tumbling into a cosmic realm, an otherworldly place reminiscent of outer space. Opening his eyes, he couldn't help but question his surroundings, pondering where he was. It felt as if he were submerged deep underwater. Another system message appeared, revealing that he was now the incarnation of Draka, the destroyer of worlds. Confusion flooded Lewin's mind as he questioned the meaning of this title, wondering what on earth it could be. Suddenly, an enigmatic figure materialized before him, a towering individual cloaked in an aura of blue. The figure emanated an electrifying surge of magic, their eyes glowing red. This figure was none other than Draka, the destroyer. Lewin couldn't comprehend what was unfolding before him. He questioned whether this was all just a dream, but the vividness and realism of the situation convinced him otherwise. Draka opened his mouth, and Lewin realized that it seemed like he was trying to convey a message. Their eyes locked, and a transfer of power seemed to commence. Hours earlier, in the training hall of Ignit Academy, the sun illuminated the surroundings, while the majestic snow-capped mountains stood tall in the distance. Within the academy, Lewin Ardal was summoned as the next student to demonstrate his abilities. Responding with a "Yes, sir," to his professor, Heidel, a combat magic instructor at the academy, Lewin was tasked with casting a fireball and hitting a scarecrow. As Lewin gazed at his hand, lost in thought, the word, fireball, echoed in his mind. It was a spell that any academy student should be able to handle with ease. However, for someone like Lewin, who lacked the ability to wield magic, it was an incredibly challenging task. Doubts filled his mind as he questioned whether he could accomplish it this time. Professor Heidel called out once again for Lewin, urging him to begin. Conjuring fire magic in his hands, Lewin was suddenly filled with hope, determined not to give up. Looking at his magical creation, he was resolute that he would succeed at all costs. Adding more power to his magic, the fireball began to take shape in his hand. With unwavering determination in his eyes, he whispered to himself that he was going to make it happen. His classmates were astonished, one urging others to witness the size of the fireball Lewin had conjured. Another student questioned if a human could possess such an immense amount of mana. Professor Heidel, filled with anticipation, eagerly awaited Lewin's release of the magic. Lewin slightly bent down, assuming a stance that would maximize the force when he unleashed the magic. He thought that his progress was promising and that if he continued like this, he might succeed. However, just as he was about to release the magic, disappointment washed over him, and he cursed himself, exclaiming, "Damn it, not again." He pleaded with his body to hold on, as his trembling hands caused him to lose balance and experience a twinge of pain. Lewin coughed and inadvertently vomited on the floor. The professor called out Lewin's name once more, while he still held onto the fire magic. Lewin expressed his inability to proceed, but the professor, with a commanding tone, urged, "Hurry and release it." Lewin, still clutching the fire magic, declared that it wouldn't leave his hand. The professor explained that Lewin was now a student of the graduating class, and if he couldn't handle a simple spell like the fireball, he wouldn't pass the graduation test. The professor emphasized that Lewin was destined to fail. Hearing this, Lewin frowned, accepting the harsh reality that the professor's words were true, he was destined to fail. The magic dissipated, and Lewin clenched his fist. He apologized to the professor, vowing to practice more diligently. During this practical shooting test, the objective was to generate 10 fireballs and successfully strike the target multiple times. Lewin, who struggled to even produce magic, let alone hit a target, seemed destined to never rise above the level of a mediocre magician. One student chuckled mockingly, questioning how someone so inept had managed to enter the academy as the top student in their class. Another student agreed, expressing agreement with the sentiment. Meanwhile, another student suggested that Lewin should simply give up, and yet another student labeled him as the academy's fool. Being a humble local nobleman, Lewin's status as the valedictorian upon entering the academy triggered feelings of inferiority and jealousy among his peers, who hailed from prestigious families. Consequently, they directed their hostility towards Lewin. While he could handle the bullying to some extent, the harsh reality that he had no hope left gradually chipped away at his very core. This was none other than the curse that had plagued him for the past 6 years, the mana evocation disorder. Although he had managed to endure the burden thus far, he began to question with increasing frequency how much longer he could hold on in the face of future challenges. After the exam, the students gathered in the corridor of the academy. As usual, Lewin found himself alone while the other students formed groups, as he had no friends among them. The students chatted with their friends, discussing how well they thought the exam had gone. From a distance, someone spoke up, tauntingly addressing Lewin as the dunce head. It was the same duo he had encountered earlier in the academy hall, the yellow-haired student leading the mockery. Chuckling, he asserted that it was time for Lewin to pack his bags, questioning what he thought about it. He added, "If I were you, I'd be so embarrassed I wouldn't show up, but you're persevering." The yellow-haired student proceeded to ask Lewin if he knew what the others called him, to which the guy confirmed that it was Dunce Head Lewin. Seemingly infuriated, Lewin managed to contain himself, refraining from engaging in a physical confrontation. Continuing to belittle Lewin, the yellow-haired student remarked that because of him, the standard of the graduating class had fallen. Mockingly, he suggested that Lewin should return to his rural territory, back to where he came from, and laughed. The chubby-looking student chimed in, stating that if Lewin lacked skills, he should at least have money. He admitted that he had only heard about the Ardle family after coming to the academy, implying that Lewin's family was foolish and acted aloof despite having nothing. Lewin's anger became visible on his face upon hearing these words. As the yellow-haired guy continued his belittling of Lewin, suddenly, Lewin charged at him with incredible speed. A powerful punch landed squarely on the yellow-haired guy's face, causing blood to spurt from his nose. The impact was so strong that a gust of wind became visible from the force, and the yellow-haired guy was sent flying. Enraged, Lewin warned him not to speak ill of his father. Touching his bleeding nose, the yellow-haired guy cursed Lewin, referring to him as a son of a bitch and expressing his disbelief. Lewin addressed the man as Ben Folt, asserting that he should have known when to stop. Lewin questioned who Ben was to meddle with his father and family. Observing the situation, the other man accompanying Ben decided to join the battle, rushing towards Lewin and attempting to throw a punch. However, in the next moment, Lewin struck him in the stomach, causing him to momentarily lose his breath. The man fell to his knees, enduring the pain. As Lewin stood before him, an aura emanated from him, signaling that he was different this time. The man eventually lost consciousness, his face hitting the ground. Ben shouted at Lewin, calling him an arrogant bastard. Surprised by the turn of events, Lewin turned to look at Ben. Ben cast a magic spell, as a surge of energy surrounded him and an electric ball materialized in his hands. Ben exclaimed, "How dare you hit me?" Lewin couldn't believe that Ben was attempting to use combat magic inside the academy. It was a clear violation of the rules. Ben unleashed the magic spell, mocking Lewin and referring to him as a worthless individual with a mana evocation disorder. Lewin wondered if Ben had no concern for the consequences, such as the possibility of being expelled. The magical spell flew towards Lewin as Ben shouted for him to die. Lewin prepared himself for the impending attack, but at the last moment, he found himself unable to move, becoming frozen in place as he stared at the approaching spell. The professor arrived on the scene, urgently appealing for both of them to stop, but it was too late. The attack had already been unleashed. Helpless, the professor could do nothing as the electric magic spell struck Lewin. Lewin's eyes filled with anticipation as he regretted his inability to evade the attack, thinking that everything was now over. However, in an unexpected twist, the scene shifted to a cosmic realm, and a system message appeared, revealing that Lewin was the incarnation of Draka, the destroyer of worlds. Lewin's status window had been unlocked. As Lewin faced the celestial being before him, another system message appeared, indicating that the artifact player had been activated. Confused and bewildered, Lewin wondered what was happening and who the celestial being in front of him truly was. Lewin found himself floating in the vast cosmic realm, face to face with Draka, the destroyer of worlds. As he contemplated the situation, he noticed that the entity's mouth opened as if it were about to speak. To his astonishment, the entity called out his name, Lewin Ardle. Shocked, Lewin realized that his name had indeed been spoken. Suddenly, a feminine voice called out his name again. When he opened his eyes, he saw Helen, a high-ranking healing magician, standing before him, asking if he was awake. Now fully conscious, Lewin's eyes widened, and he attempted to sit up on his bed, asking where he was. However, Helen stopped him, informing him that he was in the recovery room. She reassured him that it was okay to remain lying down and that there was no need to get up. Placing his hand on his head, Lewin felt a slight dizziness but mentioned that he could at least sit down. He wondered how long he had been unconscious and asked Helen, who replied that it had been almost a day. Helen expressed relief, saying, "It's fortunate that it wasn't worse." "God helped you." Lewin inquired if he was okay now, to which Helen responded, "We still need to conduct further checks, but you look too good for someone who was directly hit by a lightning bolt." There is no wound, burn, not even a damaged organ. I have never seen anything like this. This left Lewin pondering how such a thing could be possible. Lightning bolts were terrifying magic that could incinerate the entire body in an instant. Moreover, he had taken a direct hit. As he examined his hand, he questioned why he was perfectly fine. Just then, the professor entered the room. Helen informed Lewin that she would go and look further into the results since the professor had arrived. She advised him to call her right away if anything unusual happened. The professor asked Lewin how he was feeling, and Lewin replied that he was fine. The professor remarked, "That's fortunate. There was a meeting among the professors regarding the incident. First, Ben Folt will be expelled for his offensive use of magic with a strong intent to kill, spreading false rumors about the Ardle family head, and his mistreatment and bullying of you. All of these actions led to this verdict." Lewin interjected, mentioning that he had also struck Ben. The professor acknowledged this and said, "Of course, there will be a punishment for you as well. Considering these facts, you will be performing the Academy's volunteer service for 1 month." Lewin agreed upon hearing this. Furthermore, the professor expressed a desire to ask Lewin something. The professor inquired, "Do you perhaps have the artifact?" This question caught Lewin off guard because the artifact was a legendary weapon left behind by ancient magicians, said to possess unlimited mana. Lewin firmly stated, "Of course not. If I had something like that, I wouldn't have been bullied like this." The professor responded, "Considering its value and rarity, the head of the Ardle family would have already used it for the benefit of his people." Lewin looked up at his professor and asked why he was being asked that question. The professor was left speechless, contemplating what had happened during the encounter with Ben. He was certain that a red light had enveloped Lewin's body just before the lightning bolt struck, as if a high-grade artifact was protecting him, causing Ben's magic to rebound. Lewin asked the professor again to clarify what he meant, questioning in his mind what the professor was talking about. Suddenly, he remembered his vivid dream and speculated whether it was connected to the dream he had just experienced. Lewin replied to his professor, expressing his lack of understanding about what had happened and affirming that he did not possess an artifact. The professor simply responded with an, "Okay," and left, mentioning that Lewin could rest. Lewin thought to himself that he had told the truth, that he had no idea what had happened, but the professor didn't provide any further explanation. He wondered what was going through the professor's mind. Reflecting on his earlier dream and the peculiar encounter with Draka, the destroyer of worlds, and the concept of a player, Lewin tried to remember one more thing. Suddenly, it came to him, the status window. He was taken aback. As the healer entered his room, Lewin exclaimed, "What the hell is this?" Referring to the status window that had appeared in front of him, realizing that his dream had been real. The healer asked if he was alright and if he was feeling unwell. Lewin pointed at the status window and asked the healer if she could see it, the blue thing in front of him. The healer was confused and stated that she couldn't see anything, asking again if he was sure he was alright. With this revelation, Lewin realized that he was the only one who could see the status window. The status window indicated, Lewin Ardle incarnation of Draka, the destroyer of worlds. As a result of his pursuit for infinite strength, the magician Draka perished along with his world. For Draka, who lacked the ability to evoke mana since birth, strength was the origin of his power. Player. An artifact of Draka that can summon the status window and exponentially increase one's power through quests. Strength 150, agility 100, wisdom 1550. Lewin realized he needed to come up with an excuse. He claimed that it was nothing and that he had made a mistake. The healer chuckled and said it was funny. She then mentioned that the result was perfectly normal, and Lewin could now return to his dorm. Lewin smiled and thanked the healer. Despite being struck by a lightning bolt, he appeared completely unharmed today. He couldn't help but think about the man with the red eye he encountered in the otherworldly space and the status window that only he could see. The information displayed in the status window clearly stated that he was the embodiment of Draka, a powerful magician. This revelation made him consider the possibility that the artifact associated with Draka had somehow been transferred to him, although he remained uncertain. Suddenly, a peculiar window appeared before him, presenting a quest. It stated that as a player connected to Draka, the destroyer of worlds, he needed to train his body to prepare for an increase in strength. The quest involved completing a certain number of punches, kicks, and spin kicks, with a reward of a strength increase of 10 and unlocked skills. Standing in the training ground, he pondered how punching and kicking related to enhancing his strength as a magician. Despite his doubts, he took a deep breath and decided to give it a try. He threw a punch into the air, and the system window displayed that he had completed one punch out of the required 100. With his second punch, the count increased to 2. Seeing the number incrementing, he smiled and resolved to continue until he reached the goal. However, his next punch was slightly off, and the number on the system window did not increase. After a moment of contemplation, he realized that even the slightest mistake would not be considered a success in completing the quest. Under the moonlit sky, with clouds slowly drifting by, he made the decision to approach the task with greater dedication. After completing all the quests, Lewin was panting, clutching his knee to indicate his fatigue. However, a smile spread across his face as he stood before the training dummies, knowing that he had successfully accomplished the quest. A system message appeared, confirming the completion of the quest and revealing the rewards, a strength increase of 10 and unlocked skills. He couldn't help but wonder about the specific rewards he had received. Suddenly, a strange sensation washed over him. As he looked at his hand, he felt a surge of energy, a power that seemed more fundamental than mana. Grasping this newfound strength, he tightly clenched his fist, filled with delight at his growing power. Eager to test his enhanced abilities, he threw a punch into the air, and to his astonishment, a powerful gust of wind materialized. Lewin smiled, realizing that the strength behind his magic had significantly increased. The speed, air resistance, and destructive power of his spells had all undergone a remarkable transformation. As he examined his hand, he noticed that his fundamental strength had truly become stronger. However, he still wondered about the other reward called Skill Unlock. He opened the status window, and a blue system window appeared, indicating the activation of a passive skill called Force Circle. This skill replaced mana with strength, influencing all magic and movements. From now on, his magic and physical actions would be affected by his strength, as represented by the Force Circle. As he absorbed the information regarding the replacement of his mana circle with the Force Circle, he placed his hand over his chest, realizing that his mana circle, which played a vital role in releasing and strengthening mana, had vanished. In its place was the Force Circle, revolving with immense power. Lewin's eyes widened as he comprehended that this revolving strength had taken the place of his mana circle. Thoughts raced through Lewin's mind as he contemplated the implications of having a Force Circle instead of a mana circle. He couldn't help but wonder what would happen if this new circle couldn't perform the same functions as the mana circle. Would it affect him adversely? A tinge of sadness crept over him as he realized that his life as a traditional magician would come to an end. However, he quickly pushed those emotions aside, determining that it was too early to feel down. He resolved to test his newfound abilities first. With the mana circle replaced by the Force Circle, he summoned a fireball, harnessing the power of the Force Circle. As the fireball materialized in his hands, he was captivated by its incredible speed and strength. Alone in the training ground, he gazed at the fireball, realizing that he now possessed the power of an artifact. A smirk formed on Lewin's face as he fully comprehended the magnitude of this newfound strength. Due to the fundamental activation principle of magic, there is a delay of approximately 10 seconds before the magic is released. However, by bypassing this step and harnessing the power within his own body, he is able to instantly create a fireball. This ability exemplifies the power of an artifact. A system message suddenly appeared, introducing a new skill called Magician of Madness. This skill was designed by Draka, who had difficulty releasing mana. It enables the user to attack enemies by loading magic into their body, effectively imbuing themselves with magic. Additionally, the user is immune to magic cast by themselves, and their magic attacks are strengthened by physical force. The magic damage inflicted also includes additional physical damage. Lewin wondered how he could make the most of these abilities and had a realization. Could it be that Draka, like himself, suffered from a similar disorder related to evoking magic? Did Draka fight by infusing magic into his fists and legs? Lewin was astounded by the origins of this technique and questioned how Draka had come up with it. Suddenly, a new quest appeared before Lewin, a demonstration quest requiring him to use force and strength to strike a physical target. The reward for completing this quest was a permanent increase of 10 points in his strength stat. As Lewin contemplated this method, he realized that he had never considered it before. If he could become a magician using this technique, it would be advantageous. He conjured a fireball in his hand and began attacking the training dummy, hitting it with force. The training dummy was obliterated upon impact. Lewin smiled, realizing that this method had worked, unlike his previous attempts where he struggled to unleash the fireball. After completing the quest, Lewin received the reward of an additional 10 points in strength. However, he suddenly fell to the ground due to fatigue. In the next moment, he lay on the ground, relieved that the quest was finally over. Lewin thought to himself, I always failed when it came to releasing magic, but I finally succeeded with my fists. How did Draka come up with this method? What kind of being is he? Lewin wanted to investigate further but found his body too heavy to move. Soon, he fell asleep. The next morning, a student was surprised to see Lewin lying on the ground, wondering if he had fallen asleep there. Another student mentioned that it seemed like Lewin had trained until dawn and then fell asleep in the training ground. One student questioned whether they should try to wake him up, while another wondered if he was even alive. Another student reassured them, saying that Lewin had survived being hit by a lightning bolt spell, so he must be alive. As Lewin opened his eyes, he wondered why it was so noisy. Upon getting up and stretching his body, Lewin asked the students if it was their first time seeing someone sleep outdoors, which confused everyone. As Lewin walked away, still feeling sleepy, one man commented that it was his first time, especially seeing a nobleman abandon the comfort of the dorms to sleep outside. He further inquired if Lewin had been drunk. Lewin dismissed the notion and explained that he was simply exhausted and fell asleep. The students were left speechless, thinking that Lewin had suddenly changed. Another student questioned if that was really the case, but as they turned around, they were bewildered by what they saw. The training dummy or scarecrow was in fragments, with only ashes remaining. They wondered if Lewin had done it, but some students found it hard to believe since he couldn't cast a magic spell before. Back at the academy dorm, there were no students outside. Lewin approached a student named Jason, who was brushing his teeth, and Jason asked what he wanted. Jason questioned if Lewin had stayed outside the previous night and only returned now. Lewin didn't answer, and Jason inquired further, mentioning that Lewin rarely left the academy. Lewin simply replied that Jason didn't need to know. Even though Lewin was treated like a loser in the academy, Jason, known as the eldest son famous for his casting and mining skills, at least treated him nicely. Jason was a bit of a lunatic, obsessed with alcohol and girls, and often sneaked out of the academy. Jason teased Lewin, insinuating that he must have met a girl last night, which angered Lewin. As Jason continued to push for an answer about what happened, Lewin threw his clothes at Jason's face and dismissed him, stating that he was going to wash up. As Lewin sat in the bathtub, he let out a sigh of relief. He contemplated the additional quest in the system and opened the quest window. He noticed that it was a repeatable quest, but the required training had doubled while the rewards remained the same. Lewin realized that if the requirements continued to increase twofold in the future, it wouldn't be easy. As he sank into the water, Lewin thought to himself that as long as he could become a magician using this method, he would be able to manage. 1 month passed since then. The repeatable quest could be completed once a day, but the required training increased day by day, contrary to the fixed rewards. If a day passed without fully completing the quest, all of Lewin's progress would be reset to 0. Because of this, Lewin didn't miss a single day. Perhaps one good thing was that the quest requirements didn't exceed 3,000 times each. Lewin thought to himself that if he had done any more than that, he would have died from doing quests. Lewin took a firm stance and kicked through the air, completing all the quests in the system window. With 3,000 punches, 3,000 kicks, and 3,000 spin kicks, he successfully finished the quests and received a reward of 10 strength points. He had been training like that every day for the past month, and he even gained a new skill called body arts. This passive skill enhanced his body's abilities, making him stronger and enabling more elaborate movements based on his training level. Early in the morning at the academy, there were no students outside as they were in their classrooms. The students noticed that Lewin had been acting strangely lately. Someone who used to never even blink in class was now sleeping, and they observed that he practically lived at the training ground all day. One student remarked that Lewin must be trying to do something to overcome his disorder, although they believed it wouldn't work anyway. After class, the students gathered in the hallway and discussed Lewin's behavior over the past months. He had been completing the quests and also searching for any clues about Draka. However, despite looking through the books in the library, Lewin couldn't find any records of a magician named Draka. Not only that, but he couldn't find any information on the World Destroyer, player, status window, or the quests he had encountered. There was no clue to be found. With determined eyes, Lewin questioned in his mind, just who is Draka? Looking at his status window, Lewin noticed that his strength had increased to 470, agility was at 100, and wisdom was now at 1550. However, he still wondered who had given him the title of the incarnation of Draka, the destroyer of worlds. Suddenly, someone called out to him urgently. Lewin turned his attention to the voice and saw that it was Jason. Lewin asked what the matter was, and Jason inquired if he hadn't heard something. Lewin asked what he was referring to, and Jason replied, "So you didn't hear? That's why you're leisurely reading books." Curious, Lewin asked if something significant had happened. Jason proceeded to explain that the head of the Ardell family was at the academy. Lewin was taken aback upon hearing this news. His father, the head of the Ardell family, was present in the academy. In response, Lewin quickly made his way to his father's location, calling out to him. His father was with the professor and some parents of the students. As soon as his father saw Lewin, he immediately recognized him and was overjoyed to see him. Lewin and his father went to the cafeteria to have a conversation. Lewin remarked, "It's been 6 years since I was admitted to the academy when I was 10. He asked his father if he had been well during that time. His father reassured him that he had always been well. Lewin then inquired about his sister, Luina. His father mentioned that she had grown up and had been learning swordsmanship lately. Luina had stated that she was doing so to protect her weak older brother, referring to Lewin. Upon hearing this, Lewin chuckled and expressed his embarrassment, while his father remarked that Luina had always been bold. As his father sipped his coffee, Lewin felt the need to ask something and called out to his father. With determined eyes, Lewin stated that he was doing well. Confused, his father asked what he meant, and Lewin clarified that he was genuinely doing fine, with no physical or emotional harm. His father was left speechless and took another sip of his coffee. Setting his cup down on the table, his father revealed that the reason he had visited the academy that day was to ask if Lewin wanted to quit. If the academy was too difficult, he could return to their territory at any time. His father asked, "Haven't you forcefully endured a lot of difficulties and things you couldn't say?" Lewin was momentarily speechless. Lewin replied, "To be honest, I could guess why you came here after 6 years. But father, I think I found a way now. So, please make a promise to me." Confused, his father inquired about the nature of this promise. With a serious expression on his face, Lewin stated, "On my next test, I'll achieve a good result in the practical exam. In return, if I fail this time, I'll do as you want, father." After making a promise to him regarding achieving a good grade on his practical exam, his father, who recognized his determination, returned to the estate once their conversation concluded. Subsequently, the eagerly anticipated day of the exam arrived. The professor, capturing the students' attention, declared that it was the enchanted introductory examination, emphasizing that any illicit behavior would lead to failure. As the professor initiated the exam, Lewin faced it with a smile and unwavering resolve. The school examination consists of both written and practical components. The practical exam is further divided into 4 sections, which include targeting, magic power measurement, actual combat, and one-on-one combat. Despite having a condition called magic evocation disorder, Lewin has consistently achieved perfect scores in the written exams for the past 6 years. However, in the practical exam, Mikkel from the esteemed Garyhill family has consistently claimed the top position. Nevertheless, Lewin firmly believes that this time things will be different, as he is determined to secure the first place in the practical exam. After the completion of the written exams, the actual practical examination commenced following a few days of preparation. Lewin was prepared to undertake the exam when he was unexpectedly called out by someone. It turned out to be Jason, who expressed concern after observing Lewin's behavior for some time. Jason inquired if Lewin had any specific plans for the practical exam. In response, Lewin assured him that he had devised a plan and intended to approach the exam in a fresh manner. Jason's face brightened with a smile, relieved that Lewin had found a strategy to succeed. Their conversation was interrupted as someone called out Lewin's name, prompting both of them to turn and see who it was. To their surprise, it was Mikkel from the renowned Garyhill family, who had consistently secured the top position in the practical exam for 6 consecutive years. Mikkel proceeded to demean Lewin by questioning his ability to participate in the practical exam due to his magic evocation disorder, further provoking Lewin's anger and frustration. Nevertheless, Lewin maintained a self-assured smile and affirmed his intention to proceed with the practical exam. Mikkel placed his hand on Lewin's shoulder, offering a piece of advice laced with teasing. As an honor student, he mockingly asked if he could offer some guidance to someone like Lewin, who had failed the practical exam 6 times. Mikkel suggested that instead of subjecting himself to potential humiliation, Lewin should consider giving up now. Nevertheless, Lewin appeared unperturbed and responded with a confident smile, expressing his skepticism regarding the helpfulness of Mikkel's advice. In return, Mikkel asserted that Lewin was misunderstanding something. He questioned whether Lewin truly believed that someone with a magic evocation disorder, like himself, could effectively undertake the exam. However, in Mikkel's mind, he was internally confused and frustrated, referring to Lewin as a bastard. He used to intimidate Lewin, but now Lewin's self-assured demeanor was getting on his nerves. Mikkel went on to mention that he would make sure to defeat Lewin in the one-on-one combat during the exam, implying that Lewin should anticipate their encounter. As the practical exam commenced, the first section focused on targeting. Officially known as the multiple target shoot-down exam, its methodology was straightforward. The objective was to shoot down as many targets as possible with a single casting. However, unlike previous years, this year's exam introduced a heightened level of difficulty, as the targets were constantly in motion. Among the students, Herc managed to hit only 1 target, while Angelia failed to hit any targets. In contrast, another student successfully hit 4 targets. Due to the challenge posed by the moving targets, the overall performance in this exam was abysmal. Another student utilizing lightning magic achieved a score of 3 targets. Observing the student's performance in the exam, one professor remarked on the unexpectedly poor results following a slight increase in difficulty. Another professor responded by expressing disappointment in the overall quality of the graduating class that year. However, Professor Elric, who specialized in magic potion making and happened to be Mikkel Garfhill's uncle, interjected, stating that it was too early to be disheartened. He emphasized that it was now Mikkel's turn and encouraged everyone to anticipate his performance. Stepping forward to the practical exam, Mikkel positioned himself in the center and conjured fireballs in both hands. With a confident smile, Mikkel's thoughts were focused on Lewin, challenging him by emphasizing the disparity between them. Mikkel was determined to showcase his superiority in the exam. Upon the professor's command, Mikkel began his performance, unleashing his magical prowess by extending his hand forward. With precision and skill, Mikkel astonishingly hit over 10 targets with his electrifying spell. The watching students were in awe, acknowledging Mikkel's exceptional ability to strike multiple targets simultaneously. Speculation arose among them, anticipating that Mikkel might secure the top position once again. Professor Elric couldn't contain his delight and proudly questioned the other professor if Mikkel truly lived up to his reputation as a descendant of the distinguished Garyhill family. He boasted that Mikkel had the potential to become the pride of their academy, confidently stating that Mikkel would undoubtedly be chosen as this year's Grand Festival representative. However, their conversation was interrupted by Tyrion Ignit, the current dean of the academy and a 7th-class archmage. Tyrion expressed his belief that they had seen enough, as he considered the overall level of the graduating class to be lacking. Professor Heidel, on the other hand, chimed in, suggesting that they should wait a little longer, as it was Lewin's turn next. Professor Tyrion responded to Professor Heidel's mention of Lewin by confirming if they were referring to Lewin Ardell. Expressing surprise that Lewin was still attending the academy, Tyrion acknowledged Lewin's passion and suggested that they should watch his performance once again, implying a renewed interest. As Lewin made his way towards the practical exam area, many students held low expectations for his performance. However, Lewin, with a determined gaze in his eyes, viewed this as a positive opportunity to test his own strength. As a professor instructed Lewin to begin, he promptly replied with a respectful, "Yes, sir," and conjured a fireball in his hand. In the blink of an eye, multiple fireballs materialized around him, leaving the professor above astounded by the incredible speed of Lewin's spellcasting. The students standing beside Mikkel were amazed by the display of multiple fireballs surrounding Lewin, with one student even remarking that it seemed impossible. In response, Mikkel belittled Lewin, pointing out his supposed mana evocation disorder. Mikkel confidently claimed that even if Lewin cast 100 fireballs, he wouldn't be able to hit even a single target. In the midst of Mikkel's insults, calling Lewin useless trash, something unexpected happened. Lewin suddenly vanished. As Lewin vanished, a system message appeared, indicating that he had activated the skill, Time Refraction. This skill granted him the ability to move abnormally quickly for 30 seconds and teleport to any desired location. It was as if he had transformed into a typhoon, moving with incredible speed and agility. Another system message indicated that there was a cooldown period of 5 minutes before he could use the skill again. With the newly acquired Time Refraction skill, Lewin swiftly and accurately hit each target one by one, moving at a speed that was imperceptible to the human eye. As he returned to his original position, the ground beneath him crumbled, and bursts of fire erupted due to the sheer power he possessed. Professor Elric, Tyrion, and Heidel were left speechless, amazed by Lewin's extraordinary performance. Even the students, including Mikkel, were in awe of Lewin's newfound power. With a smile on his face, Lewin calmly declared that he had finished. The scarecrow was reduced to ashes by Lewin's attack, and the professor announced that Lewin had successfully hit 27 targets. This score set a new record for the exam, leaving the students astonished. Some of them questioned how Lewin could move so quickly and speculated that he used magic to hit the targets himself. Professor Tyrion applauded Lewin, praising him for his incredible performance. The crowd had mixed reactions, with some students thrilled by Lewin's achievement, while others were not fans of his. Mikkel felt frustrated and confused about how Lewin managed to accomplish such a feat. Meanwhile, Lewin basked in the overwhelming warmth of everyone's cheers and recognition, something he hadn't experienced in the past 6 years. His heart swelled with emotion as he observed his success from a distance and thought to himself, "That's right, this is the feeling I've always longed for." Professor Elric found himself expressing dissatisfaction with Lewin's actions during the exam. He complained about Lewin hitting the target while casting magic on his hands and voiced his concerns to Professor Heidel. Elric stated that he had never come across magic like that before. In response, Professor Heidel mentioned that magic is a boundless realm with endless possibilities. With a serious demeanor, Heidel explained that if everything goes according to expectation, it wouldn't be considered magic but rather mathematics. Despite Elric's continued complaints, Professor Tyrion intervened and stopped him from further interrupting. Professor Tyrion smiled and expressed that what he had witnessed that day was a remarkable miracle, crafted by one of his students. It was a flawless display of magical prowess. However, it appeared that the other professors held a different opinion. They were not convinced of Lewin's talent. In his thoughts, Elric exclaimed, "That bastard Lewin made such a mess. Who would have thought things would turn out like this?" Meanwhile, Jason playfully teased Lewin, referring to him as the Archmage. Lewin urged him to stop, but suddenly he found himself surrounded by students who were curious about his achievements in the previous day's exam. Some students expressed a desire to befriend him, mentioning that they had been in the same class for 6 years. Lewin informed Jason that he was going ahead and left. In his thoughts, Lewin reflected, "Until yesterday, I was just a loner in the academy. Everything changed overnight, so it's still difficult for me to adapt. In fact, it might have been better to be alone. Of course, there are still some people who don't like me." Lewin arrived at his dormitory. Upon entering his room, he noticed someone inside. It was Mikkel. Lewin questioned why Mikkel was in someone else's room. Mikkel responded by stating that Lewin seemed quite proud after gaining some points in the exam with something that wasn't even magic. Mikkel was sickened by Lewin's arrogance, so he came to warn him against showing off. Lewin retorted, "Isn't it because you're embarrassed that you lost in the practical exam to a guy whom you looked down on for 6 years?" This statement enraged Mikkel, causing him to grab Lewin's clothes and call him a son of a bitch. However, Lewin firmly seized Mikkel's hands and forcefully removed them, displaying unexpected strength. Mikkel gritted his teeth, wondering how Lewin had become so strong. Lewin stated that both of them needed to graduate safely, and if Mikkel truly wanted to crush him, he proposed a fair and square one-on-one combat exam, just as Mikkel had suggested. Mikkel removed Lewin's hand from his wrist, belittling him and questioning whether he was qualified to compete. After all, Lewin had received failing grades for 6 years. Lewin replied, "Well, we'll just have to wait and see whether I'm qualified or not." Before leaving Lewin's room, he stated that Lewin must not fail the next exam before the 1-versus-1 combat. Mikkel walked through the halls, his thoughts filled with frustration. He muttered to himself, "That cocky son of a bitch. He will undoubtedly fail today's practical exam without even getting the chance to participate in the one-on-one combat." As he removed his hand from his pocket, he looked at his trembling hands and wondered if Lewin was truly a magician. A few moments passed, and at the site of the second practical exam, which measured mana output, stood a statue of an ogre. Lewin had encountered this stone statue on several occasions, yet it never failed to captivate him. It was a cherished treasure of the Academy, a rare artifact that existed in only a few locations across the entire continent. Known as the Ancient Ogre, Kingram, it had been transformed into an artifact by the renowned Archmage Freud while Kingram was still alive. Trapped within the artifact, Kingram absorbed the mana of magicians and served as a sort of magical target. In this mana output measurement exam, students were required to cast magic upon Kingram and achieve a high score. Lewin turned to Jason and asked if the exam simply required them to target the statue and use their most confident spell. Jason confirmed, saying, "Yeah, but that ogre bastard is notorious for giving harsh scores. Even a score slightly above 20 is considered good enough." As the exam began, one student unleashed their mightiest attack, a powerful purple spell, against the ogre statue. However, the statue dismissively told the student to get lost, awarding him just 1 point as a magician and urging him to quit practicing magic altogether. Lewin thought the student had done well, but he knew it wouldn't be easy. The next student was called forward by the ogre statue, eagerly stepping up and expressing excitement for their turn. Meanwhile, the student who had received only 1 point felt disappointed in himself. The girl raised her hand and urged the student to watch her carefully. As she cast her spell, it struck the ogre in the stomach, impressing the statue. She asked if he truly meant what he said, to which the ogre replied that she was an irredeemable piece of trash, giving her only 2 points. The girl cried, mentioning that she had done her best. Another student managed to earn 5 points and the ogre to get out of their sight. The ogre statue displayed arrogance towards the students. When it was Jason's turn, the ogre commented that his magic was bland and asked if it was mixed with water. This infuriated Jason, who retorted, "It's 100% pure mana, you bastard." The professor warned Jason not to make a fuss and instructed him to return to his seat. Next in line was Mikkel, whose eyes showed determination to defeat Lewin. Mikkel extended both hands and cast a spell on the ogre statue. The spell struck different parts of the ogre's body. The ogre, mentioning Mikkel's last name, Garyhill, expressed disappointment. Curiously, the ogre asked if Mikkel was Josh Garyhill's son. Proudly, Mikkel declared himself as the proud third son of Josh Garyhill. Upon hearing the word, proud, the ogre chuckled. Revealing that Mikkel's father was a foolish person who cried and begged for more points, the ogre added that Mikkel was less talented than his idiotic father. Despite the insult, the ogre awarded Mikkel 27 points. This infuriated Mikkel, who exclaimed that the ogre was spouting nonsense for a mere ogre. The professor commanded Mikkel to quiet down and called the next student, Lewin Ardle. Lewin stepped forward, letting out a sigh in his mind, feeling nervous for some unknown reason. Clenching his fist and infusing it with magic, he dismissed his nervousness and replaced it with determination, urging himself that he could do it. Lewin greeted the ogre, expressing that it was a pleasure to meet him, and introduced himself as Lewin Ardle. The ogre replied, mentioning that it was the first time seeing Lewin's face. However, the ogre dismissed it, instructing Lewin to proceed with the exam. Lewin began to channel and amplify the power surging within his arm. Suddenly, the professor was taken aback, exclaiming that it was an explosion mana burn. The other students were equally astonished upon hearing the professor's words, questioning if it was truly possible for Lewin to cast such a high-level magic, classified as a Class 4 spell. Lewin pulled his arm back, seeking to generate more force and create a powerful impact. The ogre, intrigued by his stance, questioned him about it. In an instant, Lewin vanished from his position, swiftly dashing towards the ogre. He channeled the magic into his feet and delivered a mighty kick, utilizing all his strength. The professor's mouth hung open in amazement, as it was believed to be impossible to transfer magic from the fist to the foot and unleash it instantaneously. However, Lewin managed to accomplish it. One student inquired if it was truly a Class 4 magic spell, while another speculated that it might even be a Class 5 spell. As Lewin landed on the ground, locking eyes with the ogre, the student mentioned that this meant Lewin was a 5th-class magician. In Lewin's mind, he believed that his explosion mana burn had worked effectively. However, the ogre's reaction, Kingram, seemed peculiar. Lewin wondered if he had done something wrong. Suddenly, with a dark expression, the ogre questioned Lewin about his identity, specifically mentioning Draka. This mention of Draka shocked Lewin, and the ogre declared, "I have been waiting for you, Draka." Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button for more content. Feel free to leave a comment down below sharing your thoughts or suggestions. If you want to stay updated on all our latest uploads, click the notification bell icon. And hey, why not check out some of our other videos popping up on the screen right now? If you'd like to support the channel, you can do so by liking, sharing, and subscribing. It really means a lot. Peace.